What's going on, everybody? Ramdian and Black with you, downtown Toronto, talking about some cool fights going down in Brazil, Rio de Janeiro, UFC 212. Two veterans, two legends of the sport, Vitor Belfort, Nate the Great Marquardt, one of my favorite mixed martial artists of all time. This guy has basically born and raised in the fucking fire. This experiment, Nate Marquardt, has basically been around the entire friggin' time. So for this guy to be competing, Vitor too, but Marquardt even more so. If you look at what Marquardt's done in his days of Pancrase and moving through Japan into the North American market and the incredible fights that he's had, that he did to Damian Maia. Damian Maia went flying through the air. Marquardt, the only man to stop Damian Maia.
Yeah. Hey, listen, the reason he's one of our favorites is because we had the great pleasure of commentating, going back in history. And
minus the gas.
Yeah. Well, yeah, there was that period. And it was pretty clear. We went back in time and commentated the path, and we saw him grow. He's a killer jiu-jitsu player off his back. Suddenly he's really striking differently, moving forward. Suddenly he adds boxing to it in such a... You saw the experiment happen with him.
Slipping
and you saw how...
angle.
Yeah. And suddenly his wrestling game alters. It was the old school. When we talk about fighting now, and we all... Listen... You know, we have jobs and lives and families, and most of us don't have time to constantly study where the martial arts are going. So we get comfortable in spots. It's like, who's a better boxer, bro? Oh, he's got better hands, crisper hands. He's got nicer wrestling. This guy's got better taatakedown defense. That's what we still do.
I got into a fight with my brother last week about this.
Really?
Because we were talking about Brock Lesnar, and he's like, well, how's his stand-up? I'm like, it really doesn't matter.
It doesn't work that way.
It's like, well, where's the chart on 1 to 10? I'm like, but he doesn't make it about that.
Yeah,
he doesn't need to make it about that. If he doesn't want to do that, if he wants to, if it's Randy Couture, I can smash you in the head.
And even that, you thought he couldn't, and people are, but we want to compartmentalize everything. We want to explain it. How did he knock Randy out? Well, Randy said he couldn't decipher the distance because of the size. Okay, well, that's real. It's not like, well, he's not a good boxer, except all of these variables are part of it. So, truthfully, when we discuss it this way, we're doing it for simplicity. But back in these days, it was real because you could see them do it. You could see Nate Marquardt, a jiu-jitsu player with a great guard game, become a better top player. And then all of a sudden, he couldn't really wrestle. He'd just pull guard. And one day he was wrestling. And then all of a sudden, he developed some boxing. But today, it isn't done that way. And it shouldn't be described that way. And it shouldn't be judged that way. But what's fascinating about this fight between these two guys is they come from a time that was very primitive. And they come now and face each other near the ends of their career at a time where it's incredibly complex. The game is totally different. We need new words to describe it. We need new categories, new concepts. We need a new understanding. We need a new language. And young fighters don't fight anything like these guys have fought and still fight, which is why it's so amazing to see them at this juncture in their career. How much more can they evolve? Who can still continue to change? Who understands it differently than they used to? And in the end, who's going to get the moment where they get to really hurt the other guy? And it's the perfect fight for both of these guys at this stage.
What's cool about it, Vitor Belfort, the last fight in his UFC contract.
By the way, you said gas or juice, and you were talking about Marquardt. In this, out of these two? But
we all know everybody calls Vitor the Cheetor. So I mean, we all know Belfort's history, and the people have pointed the finger at him. And when it comes to any fighter in the history of mixed martial arts, and you think about steroid use, it's Vitor Belfort.
Josh Barnett. And I love Josh Barnett. Listen, this conversation...
Only because you, sort of cut you off, but only because you know the Barnett.
Yes.
Most people would look at Josh Barnett as like, that guy's not on fucking sauce.
Yeah, exactly. He failed a bunch of tests. But when he did a bunch of tests. This conversation will take less meaning. It'll be the conversation of dumb old guys who used to hang around fighting, not in that not too distant future. But what we're really talking about is an undeniable moment in time in the evolution of this sport. And both of these guys, having come up through through it. We could apply that to Barnett. We could apply it to Vanderlei, who, although I don't think he's ever been popular. Oh, no, he just ran out that one time. We could apply it to Chael, who has been. We could apply it to any of them that came up through that period. It got to this period of the Wild West where part of the evolution was they learned to fight on the ground. They learned to fight on the feet. Hey, wait, a bunch of the Americans or a bunch of the Japanese or a bunch of the Brazilians or whatever, they seem to have some kind of drugs that seems to help them. Well, we all need to try those. It became a part of the evolution of the sport, just as much of a part as a sprawl or a left hook. The time where the gains of the sport were aided for all of these guys, and when I say all, I mean 75, 80%, maybe more. Yeah. In how they could train. The accelerated learning took place because they could rest, and it's an undeniable part of the sport that everybody from that era knows. They might not all say it. It might be damaging to their careers to say it, but it's a truth of history, which is another reason why these two guys are perfect for each other. They both went through that period, and don't think they have advantages because they went through it. They have very serious disadvantages now. It has permanently harmed their body. It's permanently altered their endocrine systems, their body's hormonal, balances forever. Not just in fights. As long as they're tested, it'll affect them forever.
What's interesting about that is think about when we were younger. We were kids. Vitor Belfort was a kid. Nate Marquardt was a kid. Those two guys, you say, what do you want to be when you grow up? Neither one of them would have said, because it didn't exist, a mixed martial arts professional.
For a lifetime.
For a lifetime.
It's going to be my adult lifetime.
That's what I'm going to do forever.
Yeah. I'm going to make all my money to pay for my family and my kids fighting in a cage on television.
And a sport that didn't exist at the time.
It didn't exist.
It's to say, well, this is what you're going to do. You're going to fight in a cage.
You're going to get on a plane and you're going to fly, and they're going to stop you and have a layover in Frankfurt because you're fighting a Japanese guy. It's going to take you 2 days to get there. And when you get there, that contract you signed clearly states you will not be tested for drugs. So you know the guy you're fighting is on drugs. What would you do?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, what would you... And you don't even know what he knows because there's rumors of guys who understand this move that you've never seen before. These were world adventurers putting themselves into chaos for the experience of it and to truly test themselves. And once drugs entered it, it became an irreversible part of it. And which is why, if you understand this with judgment free, you can make jokes about the great Josh Barnett having taken drugs at one time. And it's okay. We've come to terms with the fact that Vitor took a lot of drugs at one time, or that Nate Marquardt, who I believe has also failed for testosterone replacement. So this is perfect. These guys went through all the same things, and they're at a stage in their life where they still love fighting, they still love the martial arts, they still love the tests. They're two of the greats. Vitor has done more for fighting in Brazil than most but Anderson Silva and Vanderlei.
Maybe the world, because the thing about Vitor Belfort, back in the day after he left the UFC and after he left Pride, he went and fought all over the world. He fought for Affliction, so people got to see him there. He went and fought over in Cage Rage. So if you were a British fight fan, I'm going to see Vitor Belfort for fucking sure. And what do you get to see on the undercard? I get to see this Anderson Silva guy, and I get to see this Michael Bisping guy. I love this guy. And the community grows. And Vitor Belfort, people have to understand how important this guy was. What do you make of him training at TriStar, working with George St. Pierre, who's getting ready for Michael Bisping, the team at TriStar, they know Nate Marquardt, they've been around him. That's a good thing, I would imagine.
I was sitting with Faraz, we were watching a Nate Marquardt fight that he lost. And I said, you've worked with Nate, what do you think's going on here? And he literally chalked it up to an old dog, new tricks scenario. So one thing Vitor likes is new tricks. He still does to this day. You talk to anyone who's ever trained with him, you talk to anybody who's ever been, he's always searching for new. Now, his new is not the same as Cody Garbrandt's new because he's an older man with less physical capabilities than Cody Garbrandt has at this stage of his life. But it's new ideas and new tricks. So the game for us will be to find some. And one of the things that Nate Marquardt still does, for whatever reason, and at least he has, because these guys change from fight to fight, and when you generalize, all you're doing is generalizing without the truth. But often, you see Nate Marquardt in exchanges, and because he enjoys kickboxing so much, when he spars, he kickbox spars a lot. and you see guys tuck their knuckles into the little opening because, like a lot of guys, he's training with a big glove. And in kickboxing, you get in there and you get the big glove and you shell up and you're protected. With the small glove, guys find that little window. So Vitor loves the hook. Watch Vitor to be a dirty hooker in this fight and try to like find them through that little V in the arm and that little hole and land on Marquardt. If you're Marquardt and his guys,
Dwayne Ludwig, he's worked with Dwayne for.
Yeah, that's true. That's cool. It's a great fight. It's a fantastic fight. A perfect time in these guys' lives. It's it's one of the fights I think I'm going to look the most forward to. And Vitor's crazy idea about an old man division.
I love it.
I love it, except for in typical Vitor fashion, he also outlined a lot of things that would give him huge benefits. Like, you get stood up after 30 seconds. What does that have to do with anything?
I'm not talking about
rounds.
No.
What? Why would there be 3-minute rounds? Like Vitor not only said, hey, guys over 35.
I'll give you a hell of a 3 minutes. So.
Exactly. He's like, also, let's make the rounds better for me. Let's get back to the feet quickly so I don't have to mess around down there. Like, I get it, but hey, I've gone through different phases of the Vitor appreciation in my life, and I'm at one now that I understand. I don't know how many more. He says he might fight for somebody else. There's great fights in Russia for these guys. There's great fights in Asia for these guys. He's saying he still wants to go find some fights after this. I don't know if the UFC will re-sign him or not, but I don't know how many Marquardt has. He still loves fighting. That's all he knows.
That's what it comes down to, and hopefully the fans in Brazil and the fans watching around the world get a hell of a fight at 185 pounds.